Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Ask and Wonder, the show that brings Christians and skeptics together to talk about the biggest questions in life. Today we have a special show, a very special show for me, because I was encouraged for many years by this person that we're interviewing today. His name is David Robertson, and David Robertson is a Scottish minister, blogger, podcaster, and author of two excellent books. One of them is Magnificent Obsession, Why Jesus is Great, and the other is the Dawkins Letters, Challenging Atheist Myths. He has, of course, written more books, but those are the two that really encouraged me and have encouraged many good conversations with Christians and non-Christians and non-believers in my conversations with them. So, David, thank you very much for being with us.
It's a privilege to be with you. I'm here in my Sydney office, so I'm in the future.
Yeah,
so it's good
I know. What does the future look like?
Pretty much the same as the past.
Okay.
It's believe it or not, COVID-19 is still here. Human beings are still sinful, and the gospel is still true.
Yeah, that is good. Well, David, let me say a few things about the show to the viewers, and we'll get directly to the interview. I'm very excited about that. So for those of you that are interested in the show, of course, I encourage you to subscribe to Ask and Wonder, and also know that this is going to become part of a podcast episode as well. And in the description of the video, I'll share links to David's books and some other interesting links in order to know more about him and what he does. Also, he's author of a very famous blog called The Weebly. I hope I'm pronouncing that well, David.
You are.
Okay, so I'll write some all those links. I'll share those links with you. And again, thank you very much, David, for being here. And my first question for you would be: I always ask this question to all my guests, both Christians and skeptics. Have you always been, in your case, a Christian?
No, I grew up in a Christian home, rejected it, and then for me, most surprisingly and annoyingly, was converted at age 16.
Oh wow! Hmm. Would you tell us a little bit more about that conversion?
Sure. I could never quite become an atheist, and I'm sorry if there are any of your viewers who are atheists who are listening to this, and I hope there are. I could never quite become an atheist because I just found it intellectually bizarre, dumb. Actually, I thought I would take it would require so much faith to be an atheist. I couldn't do it. So but I still wasn't sure. I wanted to be an atheist emotionally and socially, culturally. My society was so secular and everything else, and none of my friends were really Christians. But, I was very interested in politics, very interested in different things. And then one year I liked traveling as well, and I went to the United States where I had an aunt and uncle. And they said to me, would you like to go and stay at a university for a week? And I thought, that'd be great. I'd love to do that. But they weren't very honest, I'm afraid, even for Christians, because they didn't tell me. They didn't lie about it, but they didn't tell me that it was a Christian conference that I was going to with about 8,000 young Christians. And I was furious. I hated it. And yet I met some wonderful people. I met 4 Palestinian Christians who I was really impressed with, and some others. And so I thought, you know this, when I go home, I got to be fair. I actually got to read the Bible. But I'm sometimes a wee bit of a contrarian. And so somebody said to me, well, start with the Gospel of John. And so I started with 1 Kings. And I was struggling my way through it when a friend of mine, it was Christmas and New Year. And in between Christmas and New Year for us in Scotland at that time, or at least amongst my friends, it was party. So my friend phoned up and I was saying, right, which party are we going to tonight? And he said, oh, I'm not. He said, God is good. And I thought, my first reaction was, that's not fair. He wasn't brought up in a Christian home and he's become a Christian, and I was, and I haven't. So that was a kind of strange reaction for me. And my second reaction was when he said to me, look, let's not go to a party. on New Year's Eve, let's go. There was a small Brethren church in a town called Dingwall. Let's go there for the New Year's Eve service. And I thought, well, why not? Something different. So we went. And I remember sitting there, and it was a small hall, maybe 50 people, and looking up at the digital clock. And as it went round to 000 on New Year, I remember praying, God, if you exist, you show me and I'll serve you the rest of my life. And I came out of the hall to the town hall and looked up at the skies, and I wasn't hit by lightning. Nothing happened. So I went home. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. And then one Sunday morning, I got up and I said to my kid brother, come on, we're going to church. And he looked at me and he said, no way. But he's my kid brother. He's smaller than me. So I beat him up, and he came with me to church. It was my first evangelism. It was very successful. It's a methodology, you know, that people think we use. So the two of us cycled down to the local church. My mother looked in utter astonishment as we went out the door, dressed for church, because we had refused to go to church, and she and my dad were going off to their own church. And as we're sitting in that church, it's in the Scottish Highlands, the sea was outside. I could hear the sea lapping against the waves. And I think we were singing a psalm, and it wasn't anything the minister said. It was just simply this. I just realized, you complete and utter idiot. Of course God exists. Nothing makes sense if God doesn't exist. And I knew then that the rest of my life would be the second part of that prayer. If you exist, you show me and I'll serve you the rest of my life. For a while, I tried to be a secret Christian because I didn't want to be with other Christians. I didn't like Christians, I thought, which was so arrogant of me. And then, I mean, I do need to tell you this because it's significant in terms of what I ended up doing. Yeah. In school, we have these, what they call common rooms. We were sitting around a table, and one of my friends who was a Christian, there were 60 people, got up and said, they were going to a prayer meeting, and he turned to me and he said, would you like to come to the prayer meeting? And everyone burst out laughing because I was the cynic. And they laughed even more when I got up and went because they thought I was joking. I didn't come back. I went and I sat in this wee circle, 4 people, 5 people. And I remember the person on my left prayed, then the next one prayed, then the next one prayed, then the next one prayed. It's not normally how they did it. It just happened. And it came to me and I thought, oh, well, I suppose I'd better pray. And when I prayed, there was silence. And one of them tapped me on the shoulder and said, excuse me, are you Christian? And I said, yeah, I guess so. And they just looked utterly amazed. And then they said, David, will you do us a big favor? Next week, we're having a debate at the Debating Society with an atheist, an agnostic, a liberal Christian, and an evangelical. We'd like you to speak on behalf of us, the evangelicals, because you're a debater, you know. And I said, sure, I'll do that. And after I did that particular event, the head of the English department, teacher, came up to me and said, Robertson, boy, that was absolutely marvelous. You are wonderful. You know this, you almost had me convinced you really were a Christian. He thought I was putting it on. And I ended up saying to him just very simply, I said, Mr. Patterson, sir, I am a Christian and no one will ever say that again. And that was it. That was me. I was outed as a Christian. That was my coming out.
Wow, that is interesting. So I wanted to ask you just a little bit. I mean, you know, I hear very often when I talk to my Christians and skeptic friends about the matter of doubting, you know, like doubting is bad. You shouldn't ask questions and all of this. And for new generations of Christians, even also non-Christians, how important it is for everyone to ask questions, no matter the topic that is being questioned. So from your perspective and your experience, which is long and wise, what would you tell new generations about the importance of asking questions?
Well, I'd want to be extremely careful because there are different perceptions that people have, often according to culture. So often you'll get Christians say, well, doubt's the great thing to have. You need to have doubt, and this is where you need to go. And my view is, it depends what you mean by doubt. So, for example, I don't think doubting the goodness of God or the love of God or the existence of God is a good thing. I think it happens, and I think you have to deal with it when it happens. But it's not a good thing. It's the equivalent to me of someone doubting whether they really exist. You know, it's like you're going mad. I do think, however, that you need to ask questions. I would say again to anyone who's listening to this who's not a Christian, that you need to ask questions about your own worldview. And I think those of us who are Christians do need to ask questions. But I would put a caveat onto that. There needs to be a certain amount of humility. So we're not asking questions in the sense of us sitting as judges. We're not asking, we think is right way for a girl is that a whole letter to the Romans, that it was largely Paul answering a whole heap of questions that he'd been given. And I think it's a mistake when Christians don't question. I think it's a mistake when young people, especially in churches, are not encouraged to question.
I'm losing you there for a second. Can you hear me?
We question is as it. I think. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, I think the whole question thing is really, really crucial. Yeah, and you know, I just, if you lost the bit at the end, I was just simply saying that how we question is as important as if we question.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. I lost you there for a second. Yeah, that is definitely very interesting because this is just an observation. When it comes to what is happening today, David, I sometimes find it very, actually, I would say risky just to ask questions about facts that we know that they're true, you know? Like just continually just redefining terms that we know they're true. We're going to these waves of just questioning not only the good and evil and what it branches of it, but just going to the roots of what is evil, what is real, what is not, and just putting questions to all of that. So that is a good distinction.
Can I just add to that? I think that all of us have boundaries within which we work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have a framework within which we work. And if your framework is, I am good, I know the truth, everything I believe is right, anyone who disagrees with me is an idiot or whatever, it's not a good framework. I would suggest from a Christian perspective, my framework is simply this, that God is good. There's none good but God alone. You know, there is such a thing as good and evil. There is such a thing as love. There is such a thing as beauty. There is such a thing as truth. And I would say that Christ is the truth. And I think one of the big dangers in today's culture that, you know, people are very, very concerned, rightly so, about the pandemic of COVID-19. But I think far more dangerous is the disintegration of the idea of truth and the perversion of language, so that language becomes utterly meaningless. I also think that the way that social media is used, where questions are not questions but are usually accusations, is incredibly harmful. And I think our society is becoming more tribalistic and is disintegrating because it's rejected the whole notion of truth.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Which is sometimes, for me, David, it's very counterintuitive because globally, it seems that we're becoming one. At the same time, ideologically, we're just kind of parting ways and just being very individualistic in the way we perceive and talk about the things. So, yeah.
By the way, I don't think that globally we're becoming one. I think in some ways, society is becoming much more atomized and divided. So... you'll notice, again, on the internet, so Facebook will choose your adverts for you and will choose the political opinions, you know, these algorithms that will suggest to you. I think that we are less inclined to speak to people who disagree with us now than we were 20 years ago. And I find that particularly disturbing. You know, I do think there is an atomization that's occurring, and I think that, I mean, there are some aspects, of course, it's true, where globally that we are becoming more and more one world. But having said that, I would suggest that one of the lessons from COVID-19 has been that's fairly superficial, and
Mm-hmm.
we quickly get into our tribes. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in there.
Well, David, I would like to move forward and ask you questions about the Dawkins letters, and something interesting I would like to share with you. Yeah, that's the book, and I'll share a link, of course, for everyone to go and read it. You know, it was in 2013 when I was an agnostic and then became a follower of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that as soon as I was being immersed and baptized, I knew that I wanted to spend my life doing something with my faith. So I really like, having conversations with our friends, non-believers, non-Christians, skeptics. And I remember that when reading, someone told me, Pedro, you actually should read the God's Delusion. You should read this book. This book is going to challenge you. And I remember that I started reading the book because I was just, reading and learning about apologetics and philosophy. I keep reading a lot about philosophy and science. But well, in 2013, then I started reading the book and I had to stop reading the book. I had to stop because it was too challenging for me. I had to stop it. And can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. I lost you just for a second there.
Oh, that is okay.
But carry on.
Yeah, so I had to stop reading the God's Delusion in 2013, like 2-3 months into myself being a Christian, because it was too challenging for me. And I remember 4 or 5 months ago, I actually tried to read it again, and I couldn't actually finish the book because I thought that it wasn't a good book. I would say it was a necessary book because it caused a lot of good conversations, but I actually couldn't finish the book. And with this, of course, I'm not saying that people shouldn't read the book, but I would say it was a necessary book so that people could actually, both Christians and non-Christians would get into this conversation that is very important. But then I read the Dawkins letter, and I read a little bit about what happens with you and what happens after you wrote the book and in the atheist forums and everything. I would like to hear a little bit about your experience from the point you started writing the book.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I can do that. I think we're having all kinds of problems with the technology. If you can't hear me, I'll join on to another network if that, or will I just carry on as we are?
Yes, it's working here.
Yeah, okay, good. Right. Well, I knew Richard Dawkins. I was a minister in a church in Dundee in Scotland. I was doing a lot of outreach because one, I think it's something Christians should do, but actually I didn't have any people in my church. So what else was I going to do? So, reaching out to people and so on. And I was very interested in the culture and what was going on. And I saw that Dawkins had a new book coming out, and it was going to be on a subject that he'd spoken on a lot, but hadn't really written about. And that was God. And I knew it would be anti-Christian. So I went down to the local bookstore, and it's quite funny. Instead of buying the book, I lifted it off the shelf and had a coffee from the, Costa's coffee shop in the book, and sat down and read chapter 1. And I came back the next day, because I didn't particularly want to buy it. I came back the next day and had another coffee and read chapter 2. And I just did that. In fact, it cost me way more in coffees than it did to buy the book. And since then, I've bought about 3 copies of the book. But what amazed me about it was I opened it saying, okay, I have to be open-minded. And, this will really challenge your faith. And the first thing that struck me about it was how dumb it was. And I mean, really bad. There are books by atheists that are intelligent and challenging. This is not one of them. And then the second thing I realized was that he wasn't writing to convert people like me. He was writing for people who were already atheists, particularly in America, and basically trying to get them to come out and trying to get them to portray themselves as victims. And I thought it's very clever. It's a very clever marketing ploy. And I discovered later that that was actually the truth, that his publisher, his book had been written for a while, but his publisher had said, let's hold off until George Bush becomes unpopular, and then we'll launch. So it was a book that was written for atheists, for the American market. And it was kind of like a turf war amongst atheists, because there were the ones that said, you need to be really nice and just, God's going to die out anyway. Belief in God is going to die out anyway. And then there were others who said, post 9/11, we've really got to go for it. So Dawkins, for example, after I wrote the book, I remember getting an email. What bugged him was that there were theists everywhere, Christians and Muslims and others. So, I mean, as if to prove that point, I got a letter from 2 students, one Muslim, one Christian, saying, don't tell the boss, but we're actually students of Richard Dawkins, and we're both, we both believe in God, except it was quite funny. But anyway, I saw this and I thought, this book is really, in Scotland, we would say, doing my head in. It was just, I couldn't believe how bad it was. So I wrote a response, which was a letter, an open letter, which went on the Free Church website. And within a few days, I was getting lots of emails from atheists. And I was so impressed. I thought, wow, Free Church people don't read the Free Church website, and all these atheists are reading it. It's great. But then I got a letter from somebody, which was kind of an email, which was kind of life-changing, because it said, Dear David, I don't agree with you. I am an atheist, but I'm sorry for all the things that they're calling you, and we're not all like that. And I wrote back and said, what are you talking about? And he said, oh, it's the Dawkins website. Well, I didn't even know Dawkins had a website. So I went on to it, and my open letter had been posted there not by Dawkins, but by the moderator of the site. It was on their front page. When I got to it, it had 600 plus comments, wow, which was way beyond anything that was there. And stupidly, I started replying to them. Okay, a third were reasonable, a third were quite attacking me, but a third were as if I'd gone on to the Al-Qaeda or the ISIS website and said Mohammed was a pedophile or something. I mean, it was just vitriol. It's unbelievable. And I came to realize something immediately, that these atheists were emotional atheists, not rational. And often they were recovering religious people. They even had a converts corner. And I gave them the motto. I thought, this is your motto. There is no God and I hate him. It was just, I could not believe the level of antagonism. So I just thought, well, stuff this, I'm going to carry on writing. So I wrote a letter to correspond to each of Dawkins' chapters. And this Christian book company phoned me up and said, look, can you do a book on this? Can you do these letters and we'll publish them? And I said, when? And they said, like, end of December. This was at the beginning of December. So basically I wrote a book in a month.
Wow.
And all the time I was corresponding. I mean, at the end, I think there were over 7,000 responses before I got banned from the Dawkins website.
Wow.
And it ended up being published. Now, I'm not really anybody. I'm a nobody. And, I was really quite surprised. It became a bestseller. I mean, I think it's been translated into about 15 languages. It was a bestseller in secular bookshops, which is what I wanted. We launched it in a secular bookshop. So I really wrote it for Christians. For non-Christians, and a lot of Christians picked up on it as well. So that's the story behind it.
There are many good things about the book. I've really enjoyed it, and you also have a very simple, direct way of writing, which helps in many ways. For me, as I've been speaking English only for 7 years, so that helps me a lot, But at the same time, the arguments are so incisive. So there's something I wanted to ask you about, David. I think that there's one key thing that you shared in this book that was very interesting. And at one point, you said that there is a presupposition, and that is that the materialistic view of the universe is called by atheists rationalism. Mm-hmm. And I think this type of redefinition of terms, again, it's just doing some things that to the conversations that, don't take the conversations to good terms. So would you tell us about your experience with this when atheists talk about rationalism, thinking that there's no worldview behind that rationalism that they're actually talking about?
Yeah, I think this is where language is really, really important, and how we use language. So I can give you, a couple of examples. I mean, in general, well, I'll give you one example, but just in general, the presupposition is by Dawkins and others that the more intelligent you are, the more rational you are, the less likely you are to believe in God. And that's why they use derogatory terms like you believe in the sky fairy, or whatever. And they attack faith and all that kind of stuff. Now the trouble is that they're not that, I don't find them to be that rational, because I try and take them to the my view of rationality is, if you say 2 + 2 = 4, that you've got a step there. Here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3, here's step 4. And I find that it just doesn't, they're not that rational. I mean, their worldview is that there can only be the material. Now that itself is a statement of faith. They can never prove that, but they live their lives by that. So for example, when an atheist says, well, prove miracles, you can't, because the atheist always presupposes that miracles, that they rightly think that miracles require a God, something supernatural beyond nature, but they've already predetermined that there can be no such God. Therefore, if anyone claims a miracle, there has to be another explanation for it. It's as simple and straightforward as that. So they have their fundamentalist beliefs, and that's how I coined the term, the NFAs, the new fundamentalist atheists, because that's what they are. They do not move out of that little paradigm. And every now and then I'd go in and prick their bubble, and they get so annoyed. There are many atheists, by the way, who've come to see that, and a significant number of whom have become Christians, which is great. But I mean, I'll give you 2 examples. One, I remember arguing, somebody on the Dawkins website, when I was allowed on there, was arguing, and he just simply said this. He said, I can't have an intelligent discussion with you because if you believe in God, it's not intelligent. And I pointed out to him that was a circular argument, that if you are automatically saying everyone who disagrees with you is not intelligent, therefore, I said, it's not a very intelligent statement. There are atheists who are intelligent, for example, and who you can have an intelligent discussion with. But the idea that the definition of intelligence is that you don't believe in God, that's what we call the emperor's new clothes thing. People go, oh, well, I don't believe in God because intelligent people don't believe in God, and I want to be intelligent. So therefore, and it's the emperor's new clothes. It's people thinking they're intelligent because, lots of intelligent people don't believe in God. But lots of intelligent people do believe in God. Lots of scientists believe in God, as I point out in the book. And Dawkins, of course, explains that away by saying, well, they're just creatures of their age, to which I would say to Dawkins, you're just a creature of your age. So there's that side of it, the materialistic side of it, the intelligence side of it. But the example I wanted to give was of the use of language. So I was intrigued by this use of the term faith. Dawkins describes faith as belief in spite of or despite of the evidence. Now, you will struggle in any dictionary in the 20th century up until the last decade, you will struggle to find that definition anywhere. It's not there. Faith is not defined as belief without evidence, but it shows you the power of the culture and the memes and the new atheists, because now that is generally how faith is described. It's described as blind, but it's not. That's not the Christian teaching. Faith in and of itself is pointless. I could have faith that Elvis is alive, that he lives on the moon, that he's coming back on a giant rat to rescue the world and give us all free cheese. I mean, I can have faith that that's going to happen. I could even genuinely believe it, but it doesn't. It's pointless. Faith is, that's how the world uses faith. We ask for faith in a person based upon evidence. Now, we don't assume that we have to have all the evidence and we have to be 100% certain, because you cannot be 100% certain, I don't think, about anything. But faith in that latter sense, I mean, let me give you another example. So there's in America, you've got this show. We've got Britain's Got Talent. You've got a show called America's Got Talent, I think.
Yeah, that is
And
interesting. David, I was a finalist in Spain's Got Talent.
were you? Oh, you're
Yeah.
kidding me. What was your talent? Were you singing?
I was a saxophone player. So
Oh,
that is
wow.
actually what allowed me to travel all around the world. So that's actually the show I was part of it in Spain in 2000.
Oh, that's hilarious.
In 2020.
I must look you up on YouTube. That is absolutely brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, okay. So
you can use it as an example if you want to make fun of it, or whatever. You can do whatever.
Yeah, no. I would not make fun of. I would not make fun of you playing the saxophone. I mean, I quite like watching some of the stuff, but it was quite funny because they had this guy come on and said he was going to sing, and he sang, and he was like truly dreadful. Like, he was absolutely no way a finalist. It's one of those things, and you can see the panelists going, oh, And then Simon Cowell, of course, does this. He just goes to him. He says, "Don't give up your day job. You can't sing. You can't, and he really went for him. And it was pretty cruel, but you got to be cruel to be kind. So the guy comes off the stage and he's in absolute tears. And he turns to the presenter with the microphone and says, Simon doesn't believe in me. Simon doesn't believe in me, but I believe in me. I'm going to be number one. I'm going to be. And I just thought, you idiot, you can't sing. And then I thought, actually, you probably could be number one. Apparently talent's not all that, but it just struck me, I've got faith that I can sing. You can't sing. Or what's the Disney thing? I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky.
Yeah.
No. Try jumping out a 10-story building. You can't fly.
Yeah.
You can believe it all you want. And I think that redefinition of faith is a great example of how irrationality and control has taken grip in our culture.
Yeah, that is so right. An experience that I'm having quite often, I would like to hear your thoughts on this, David, which is when I talk to atheists, some of them, as you said, they're rational atheists, and you can have really, really intelligent conversations. In this intelligence, actually, that in meaning it takes a thought-provoking conversations, because they really actually want to listen to what you want to say. And the thing about me is always when I talk to an atheist, I focus my conversation, or at least I try to see what they have to offer if Christianity is not true, what they would put instead of Christianity, because I get the sense that many atheist thinkers or secular thinkers, they're experts at deconstructing Christianity. They're experts. I mean, which is beautiful. It doesn't surprise me, because Christianity is there. There's a Bible, there's a book. You go there, you can read it, you criticize it. But when it comes to then, scrutinizing the secular worldview, then it becomes very ambiguous. I remember a conversation you had with Matt Dillahunty at Unbelievable. And it is just very interesting to me, because I'm not actually, with all my respects, of course, always for every person, Matt Dillahunty is an expert at deconstructing, in a way or another, Christianity. But when it comes to just talking about what he would put instead of Christianity, or putting forward kind of a system of thoughts that would be in place of Christianity, I never hear anything there. So in your experience with this type of conversation around this topic, what would you say to all of this?
Okay. Let me, I'll tell you about Matt Dillahunty in a minute, but let me say that I think your observation is absolutely correct, because take something like Black Lives Matter and things like that, Now, it's a truism, I hope, that Black Lives Matter. It's also something that people need to be aware of, racism and all the problems associated with it. I don't deny that. But what I've noticed with a lot of people who are kind of shouting about this is they know what they want to destroy, and they know how to pull statues down. They know how to knock things down. They don't know what they're going to replace them with. Yeah. So the Black Lives Matter movement talks about destroying the nuclear family, basically destroying Western society, but they have no idea what they're going to replace it with. And I find that is very common. So as a general thing, I think that's common. Matt Dillahunty is interesting because I found that American atheists in general, particularly Southern ones, so I'm sorry for saying that.
No, that is okay.
They tend to be the most vitriolic.
Yeah.
And Matt Dillahunty, how that program came about, and I would recommend that people listen to it. You can get it on the Unbelievable.
I'll not pull that link. I'll put a link in the description.
Put a link for it, because believe it or not, I got a lot of criticism of that show from Christians, from some Christians, but I've met more people who are influenced, including one guy who was an agnostic who's now a Presbyterian minister. And he listened to that show and he thought, Matt hasn't got anything.
Yeah.
He just hasn't got anything. Matt was a hero to him. And then he realized he's got nothing. And that's really what happened to me. Because I'd been on Unbelievable several times, and all these atheists kept phoning in and saying, it's too easy for him. It's too easy for him. Let Dillahunty take him on. Because for those of you, your audience who don't know, Matt Dillahunty is an atheist, I think in Texas. And he has this show. And what he does is he takes the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. So he gets people to phone him in, and he just mocks and he appears to be very, very clever with a lot of his people, but he's not that clever. And so I was asked to come on this show, and it ended up being quite antagonistic. Now, what amazed me about Matt was the illogicality of what he was saying, because I would say, for example, give it one example, I would say, either the universe was created or it wasn't. And he would go, well, there could be a third option, but we don't know what it could be. And I'm going, either 2 + 2 is 4 or it's not, and so it was at that level. And then he tried to take me on the Nazis and various other things. Yeah. He, for example, said taking life was bad. So I asked him about abortion and he wouldn't answer, mm-hmm. And it just went on and on and on and on and on like that. Now, I know he was really angry because normally Matt posts shows that he's on immediately afterwards. And this one he didn't, not for about a week. Now, it's funny, people see what they want to see. So on the one hand, I guess you could see that there might be Christians who maybe kind of like the way I do things, and whatever happened, they were going to say you do well. Although there's not many people like that, to be honest. Yeah. But on the other hand, I was so amazed by how many atheists picked up on the Dillahunty thing and said, oh, it was brilliant. I know that, I don't think Matt thought that. And what got me was the neutral people, or people who are a bit more open-minded, and they could see he had nothing. Mm-hmm. The emperor has no clothes. Yeah. And that's it, and I've seen that several times. I remember doing a debate in Mississippi, and I was terrified because it was in a liberal arts college. The professor was a professor of philosophy. He was a former Baptist. He was an atheist. It was his students. He was very popular, ponytail, Led Zeppelin shirt, the whole thing. The theater was absolutely packed. In fact, they had to move it several times into the biggest building they could find. It was all his students. And I was, it was hostile audience for me. And I was praying, Lord, help me, help me. And after about 5 minutes, I felt like, if you've seen the Lord of the Rings film, the second one, when they're attacking Helm's Deep, and the king says, is that all you've got? And of course it wasn't. They had a big bomb that was going to blow the thing up. I'm waiting for the big bomb. I'm just listening to this guy and I'm thinking, is that all you've got? Why was I worried? Is that all you've got? And there wasn't a big bomb. And I realized, wow, you've got nothing. You really have nothing. Compared to the gospel, you've got nothing. And I remember afterwards, one of the lecturers came up to me and she was really angry. She said, I'm a Buddhist. That was disgraceful. You're just trying to indoctrinate these kids. And I said, oh, lady, back off. They're your students. You get them every single day. You're feeding them your nonsense every single day. All I did was present them an alternative. The fact that they liked it, that's not my fault. The fact that your philosophy is rubbish, I can't help it. And she said, oh, that's outrageous. It's outrageous. I said, I know. The gospel is outrageous. Isn't it wonderful? So that's my story. Yeah.
So David, what about now? How open are you now to have conversations like that? Do you still do those kind of debates?
Yeah, I'd like to. I mean, I'm very happy to. I mean, I find that the culture shifted a bit. People don't do those so much. There's two reasons for that. Number one is most Christians think, oh, we don't want to do that. You know, we've got to be really, really nice to people.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, we want to be like you. And then they'll want to become Christians, which I think is both patronizing and illogical.
Mm.
And also, if I want to be really nice to people and someone's throwing themselves into a fire, I still got to tell them they're going into a fire. So I think you can respect people. I think you can love people, but you can also disagree with people. That's one thing. I think the other thing is, from my point of view, the world is becoming more atomized and people are less open to rational discussion. So I do think there's a problem there. Yes, I'm very, very open to having those kinds of conversations. I usually have them much more now, less on a debate level and more on a conversational level.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think that secular media is becoming much more polarized in terms of who it lets on. So I remember I was phoned up to do a television show once, and the producer asked me to come on. And I said, yeah, and she was delighted. And it was a particular subject, but she asked me what my view was on the subject, and I told her, and she went, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, what do you mean? She says, we can't have you on. I said, why not? She said, you're far too reasonable. I said, what? She says, I said, you were looking for a guy with a dog collar who's going to come on and yell that anyone who drinks alcohol is going to go to hell. She said, yeah, basically.
Wow.
She says, but you're far too reasonable. You can't come on. And I remember another man who was a gay activist said to me, David, I hate you. And he said, I hate you because you make it sound reasonable and good. And he said, you know, if you'd been my vicar at school, I'd probably still be a Christian. I don't want to be a Christian. And I find that there's people have
David? Can you hear me, David? Well, I think we have lost David, or perhaps David lost me. Yep, we lost him. Let's just wait to see if he joins us again. And he is. David is here.
Yeah, I'm back.
That is okay. That is okay.
Yeah, I've put a different connection because I think it is my connection at this end, actually.
That is okay.
Where did we get to?
Yeah, well, you know what? We're having a conversation. I'm here in Nashville. You're there in Australia. This is amazing. So if we have a few hiccups, I think you say in English, I mean, this is amazing. So please keep going.
Yeah, no, well, I was just saying that I find that people are, there's an atomization of society, a bias in secular media against Christians. They have stereotypes of religious people. If you don't fit the stereotype, you don't come on. I find that, but on the other hand, I do find that in Western society, particularly the United Kingdom, Europe, and here in Australia, people are more open to the gospel than they've been for 25 years. I'm not sure about the States. I think it depends which parts of the States you're in. I think there's been a backlash against some types of Christianity. But at the end of the day, I would simply say this. Sam Harris wrote a book called Letter to a Christian Nation, which was an open letter to America. I would suggest that if America follows the route that Sam Harris suggests, and I think in general that is happening, then it will finish America. And I think that when I convey that message, when I communicate who Christ is, what Christianity has done, that lots and lots of people are curious and want to find out more.
Definitely. David, there is something before, I know this is a big question, but I just want to miss the opportunity to talk to you about this. I've heard you saying a few times that the reason why you're a Christian actually is because of the problem of evil. One of the main reasons, right? And there's a quote in your book that I really loved. And I feel like I felt this when I was reading the Bible for the first time 7 years ago. You say here in the Dawkins letter, the Bible is descriptive, not prescriptive. It tells how things happened and and not how things should have happened.
Yeah.
I remember, David, the first time I was reading the Bible, I was a huge skeptic, and I was reading Galatians, and I got to the parts when Paul and Peter are having an argument, and I thought, how is it possible? Like these two important people, the person that wrote this letter decided to put this here. Yeah. Paul, right? So like he was just showing how even at the beginning of Christianity, there was some, misconception. There was some problems of understanding. Of course, if you go in the Old Testament, you see also incredible problems with characters. What would you say to people that are listening, for example, going through COVID-19 and all the evil that we see in the world now? What would you say to this, David?
Well, I mean, there are several different things in there. First of all, in terms of the Bible, I think it really, really important. People say the Bible, you can get the Bible to mean whatever you want. Well, you can if you're dishonest. So, the Bible says there's no God. It does. The phrase, there is no God, is actually there. Okay, Psalm 14 verse 1 says, the fool says in their heart there is no God. Yeah. But yeah, the Bible does say there is no God. You can be dishonest like that. You can take things out of context. So I have this phrase that I say, a text without a context is a pretext for whatever you want it to be. And that's what people do. This is not a boast. I don't think I've ever lost a debate with an atheist, not because I'm particularly clever or brilliant, which I'm not, but because they don't know what they're talking about in terms of the Bible. They really don't. It's very rare to come across one who does. But in terms of the whole question of evil, I think there also requires honesty and clarity. And logic. So I would say simply, does evil exist? That's my starting point. And then I would say, okay, if evil exists, what is it? If we're just chemical reactions, I mean, Dawkins is honest in the God Delusion. He basically says there's no such thing as evil. The universe, but there's not good either. That's the point. You don't have evil, you don't have good. So it's a starting point for me that evil exists. So I mean, one story that will maybe help people understand. So I'm doing a debate at the University of Cambridge, and with me is a well-known professor, physics professor, and against me is the head of the Atheist Society and another professor. And the motion was ridiculous. This house believes that God can be proved or something, or that there is a God. And I knew we were going to lose it. It was just, I wasn't there to win the debate until my opponent stood up and said, and quoted, I think it may have been Bertrand Russell. I can't remember exactly, but after the Second World War, stating on the BBC, Dachau, and Dachau was one of the concentration camps like Auschwitz. Dachau is wrong, is not a fact. And I had an interruption. I said, excuse me, I do want to interrupt you. I want to take one of my interruptions. And he said, I thought you would. And he said, look, I believe that Dachau was wrong, but it's not a fact like gravity is a fact. You can't prove it scientifically. And I said, wow. And he said, well, could you prove it was wrong? And I said, yeah. I said, and I remember praying what we call a Nehemiah prayer, Lord help me. And I just looked at him. I said, yeah, I think I can. And he said, how? I said, well, it's very simple. I said, the only reason you say that is because you are starting with the presupposition that there is no God. And because there is no God, you're smart enough to work out that right and wrong are just social constructs and that you can't ultimately prove them. So in terms of morality, you cannot prove that Dachau was wrong. And he said, yeah, but you're starting with the presupposition that there is a God. And I said, no, I'm not. He said, what? He said, what are you starting with? I said, this is what I'm starting with. I'm starting with the presupposition that there's evil. I said, and I looked at the whole audience. I said, every single one of you here, who of you is going to tell me? At that point, I had an 8-year-old daughter. I said, if my 8-year-old daughter is raped and murdered, which of you would ever have the nerve to say, well, we're not sure that's wrong? We can't prove that's wrong. I said, I'm starting with that's wrong. So I'm saying it's wrong. It's wrong for someone to do that. And then I'm asking, why is it wrong? 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 And I keep going. I keep asking until I get to the final point. And the final point is what Dawkins says, that without an absolute being who gives us morality, it's virtually impossible to have an absolute morality. And so my argument is very simple, that the existence of evil and our awareness of that is a huge pointer towards God. The other aspect of that, just on the absolute morality, I mentioned the professor before in Mississippi. I remember at one point, he said, when I hear somebody, sorry, forgive the accent, when I hear somebody say there are no that they believe in absolute morality, I reach for my gun. And I thought, only in the southern US could you have an atheist saying they reach for their gun. I just thought that was brilliant. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me, are you absolutely sure there are no absolutes? And he went, you don't get me that way. And I said, I've just got you. Yeah. I said, you said there are no absolutes. Either that statement is absolutely true, therefore self-contradictory, or it's not true.
Yeah.
You have no option with that. And I think that's exactly the same.
Wow. Well, David, that is fascinating. Of course, the nature of these conversations, they could go for long, and I have here very interesting questions. But my last question for you before we part ways: Are you actually now thinking about writing any new books concerning these topics?
Yeah. So I mean, the Dawkins Letters was, I thought, a one-off. I was just a minister in a church doing outreach and evangelism. And I thought it would, last 6 months, a year. And it's lasted, well, that was 2007. So this is 13 years later. Magnificent Obsession was written in response to Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great, because the responses to it were largely why Christianity is great. And I thought, no, this is about Jesus. And I do want to say that to your listeners. Ultimately, everything is about Christ. So for me, that was also, I got the title of that from a group of Amish in Montana who the younger ones had become born-again believers, and the BBC did this marvelous show called Omnibus, where they filmed the split between the two groups, the old Amish and the younger Amish, the evangelical Amish. And the leader of that group, to cut a long story short, was asked by the presenter, what does Jesus Christ mean to you? And the guy looked at the camera and he went, Jesus, he is my everything. He is my magnificent obsession. And I never forgot that. And so I used that as the title a few years later. I wrote a book called Ask, A-S-K, Ask, Seek, and Knock, for teenagers. And it's like 52 questions. And your listeners are smart, so they'll work out that's one per week, for 15 to 17-year-olds. But somewhat bizarrely, it's become a hit with adults because, and I was trying to work out why, and I realized why. Most adults don't want 7,000 or 70,000, word answers to common questions. Yeah. I write 700-word answers and leave people books, to think for themselves if they're interested. So these were just questions that teenagers asked. So I'm going to do a follow-up to that called Seek.
Oh, wow.
I'm also, the Dawkins Letters and Magnificent Obsession, I want to end up being a trilogy. So Sam Harris, as I mentioned, Letter to a Christian Nation. I'm writing something called Letter to a Post-Christian Nation as well. Wow. And, the Dawkins Letters, I did write it for non-Christians. Magnificent Obsession I wrote because I couldn't find a book about Jesus to give to my non-Christian friends. And I think every Christian should have one. So I didn't have one, so I just wrote one. And I think this issue of the impact of Christianity, particularly on the US, the UK, the West, I want to write, again, probably a series of letters to my non-Christian friends saying, okay, you can destroy, but what are you going to replace it with? And my answer to that is, I don't think you've got anything. And I think what we need is a renewal and revival of biblical Christianity, not nominal Christianity, not cultural Christianity, but what all of us need is for more people to become Christians. And I think that's what you're about. That's what you're trying to do. That's what all of us in, you in your small corner and I in mine, each of us lets our light shine.
Sometimes it's very hard for me not to say amen in this show, but I kind
You could say
I kind of feel like it. Well, David, thank you very much for spending time with me. It has been a pleasure to be with you. And for all the viewers, I'll be sharing information about David. So you guys can get one of his books, and perhaps just go to the Weekly and and read his blogs. It has been fascinating. You truly, I need to share this with you. I truly think that you have talent to be so descriptive and in a very simple way to get to people's hearts with wittiness, but also with some type of innocence in conversation that is needed today, and this type of thought-provoking and challenging conversation where you're actually taking care of people's hearts while you're actually challenging them. And I think we need that so much. So David, thank you very much. And please stay with me after we finish the interview. But thank you very much for all the viewers, and I'll see you soon.